Some time ago I rediscovered a box with my brother's old tin soldier collection. A long time ago, these were all the rage in wargaming, apparently. My brother had managed to acquire quite a collection of molds. We have a lot of Carolinians, I mean, really a lot. And a Viking. These guys are pretty cool, but for the most part they are half round, meaning they are a bit squished in one direction. This was done so you wouldn't use as much metal per figure, while still getting some depth in the sculpt. And honestly, I'm not a fan. There's just something so much more appealing with a fully round figure. Something like these. Old metal warhammer minis. I concede that modern digital sculpts have the potential to be more detailed and more finely sculpted, but hand sculpts make up for the difference many times over with pure charm, in my opinion. I want to make something like this, but with my own characters. And it turns out, it's not even that hard. This is how I did it. Okay, so I started with a sketch, and a pretty simple one at that. There's no need to go beyond what I can sculpt as far as details goes, and I'm pretty familiar with this character anyway. It's the main character, Valeria Rosa, the Blood Magic Knightess, from my world building project, Heroes of the Ravaged Gardens. Here is my latest iteration of her character, fully rendered, so you can see what I'm aiming for. Then it's onto sculpting. Epoxy clay is pretty popular for mini kit bashing and sculpting, but I'm not very familiar with the medium, so I opted for polymer clay. You have to bake polymer clay in an oven to cure it, but as long as you do that often, it's pretty easy to build up the model in stages without ruining your previous work. You don't waste much time waiting, because the mini is so tiny, it both cures and cools back down really quickly. I did most of the finer sculpting and details with a hobby knife on the hardened clay too, as it gives me more control to work with the harder material. I haven't yet mastered the arcane art of filming something this small and fiddly, while focusing on sculpting at the same time. But if you want to see more of that, I can recommend some guys that have. My friends Taran, Arjan and Noe. Now, I've gone and finished the master sculpt, and that means it's time to make the mold. Because of the holes here, I need to make it in two parts, just like the old Carolinian ones. I've never made a mold of anything before, but there's so much readily available free information about this online, it's honestly very easy to learn. I made a little box of Lego to contain my mold, filled half of it with modeling clay, and embedded my mini in it. With a sculpting tool, I made sure to get the clay fitting closely to the mini, trying to get the mold line in a place so it would be easy to remove the cast and where it wouldn't be too obvious if it showed up in the cast. I made indents in the clay, which will help keep the finished mold aligned later on, and put this little wooden piece so that the finished cast would be able to slide into a slotted base. For the silicone that makes up the mold, I literally just typed pewter casting silicone into Google and found this. It's sold by a Swedish company, but seems to be roughly equivalent to Mould Max 60. This is a two-part silicone rubber that needs 5% hardener. And then we pour. You want to pour a thin stream of silicone next to your master so that it fills from the bottom up and hopefully gets into all the little nooks and crannies. When the first side is dry, remove the clay, lube up the silicone so it doesn't fuse with the second part of the mold, and pour the other half. And 24 hours later, we can crack it open. This looks pretty good to me. After cutting vents and pour spouts in the mold with a knife, we can finally go to casting. My first attempts didn't work at all, but it did look promising. It took me a while of cutting bends and experimenting before I could get a cast, and I never got it to cast both the sword and the figure in one go. The liquid metal is not as viscous as it would have to be to fill up like this. That's not a big deal, because I'm not running a factory production line or anything. Just something to keep in mind when making molds in the future. Anyway, let's take a look at the final cast. Come on, this is so cool. I love it. We also need to make sure the model works, I guess. So I have to give it a paint job. I cleaned up all the little imperfections and numbarks from the mold and gave it a proper wash with soap. Otherwise the paint won't stick at all. I primed it with a black base layer. This should be actual primer, ideally, but honestly this is just regular paint and it's fine. Especially as I plan on top coating it afterwards. And then I painted it. I have no idea what to say here. I mean, I put paint on it and I tried to put the appropriate paint in the right place, and I tried to do some highlights and dark shadows. I tried to not fuck up the eyes. I've been watching a lot of Rogue Hobbies. She's my newfound favorite model painting channel and make great painting videos. Highly recommended if you want some more insightful painting commentary. Anyway, I'm finished, and it looks pretty good, if I can say so myself. The platonic ideal for a miniature base is small, square and green, so of course that's what I'll be placing Valeria on. Then I gave her a protective top coat. And glued her sword in place. And it's done. My first ever miniature. I made this for two reasons. One, because it's super cool and I love it. And two, so I have something to trade or give away to my kit bashing, model painting, miniature making goblin friends. And for that I wanted to look really cool and professional. I took a whole lot of inspiration from the old Warhammer figures, ordered a bunch of Euro snap blisters from a Chinese factory, designed my own labels, printed them out on photo paper, cut them, rounded the corners, threw them in the blister pack with the figures, a base, a piece of foam, and that's finished. One of the coolest things I have ever made. I hope you like it too. That's it for today. Take care. Bye!